Hi guys, it's Kai. Welcome back to my channel. This is going to be a two-part video. As you can see, the hair that I've got on right now is clearly reminiscent of Lady Gaga Telephone. I wanted to do my own recreation in my own little style. I love the color yellow, especially on hair. It's one of my favorite hair colors. I don't love the look of dark-rooted yellow, but I do love the look that she had with the blonde streak in the front. But before I show you how I achieved the color, I wanted to do an in-depth tutorial on how I sew my wigs together, starting from 1 frontal and 3 bundles of human hair. So this video and the next one is sponsored by Klaiyi Hair. They've sent over 3 bundles of human hair. It's blonde, 613 straight hair, as well as a frontal that's 13 inches wide, 4 inches deep. If you have no experience, if you're really a beginner, it might be easier for you to just buy a wig pre-made, which they also sell. Although I think it's a fun exercise to try to do it on your own, maybe try to save a little money, and you can really control that way the density of the hair if you want to add more hair to it, if you want to save a little bit of money, maybe use 2 bundles instead of 3. By sewing together the bundles, you really have complete control over everything. So I want to go in depth in this video on how I sew together my wigs. So I'm going to show you guys in a second everything you need to start sewing together your wigs on your own, and I'll be back in the next video to show you how I achieved this color, but I'm going to let Boy Kind take it away from here. So I'm going to be doing this video talk through style because there's lots I want to cover here. So I've got us our hair here. Again, I got 3 bundles of 613 straight hair and frontal. By frontal, that means the lace is going from your ear to ear and it goes about 4 inches back on your forehead. These are the 3 bundles of hair that we're going to be working with, and these are going to go in the back of the head, and in the front is the lace frontal. I've seen some confusion about what is a frontal, what is a closure, what is a full lace wig. Lace frontal just goes on your hairline and your forehead and about 4 inches back or less, depending on how they size the frontal. A closure only has lace right here, and you're meant to part it down and cover up the rest of the hairline with just hair. A full lace wig would be an entire wig cap that's made out of lace like this. But all the wigs that I wear, and you've seen me wear, are just lace frontals, meaning the wefts of hair are just sewn into a fabric cap on the back, and only the front of it is lace like this. The way you prep your bundles to be sewn on is you just take out the elastic band that's holding it together at the top, because it's all tightly rolled up for the sake of packaging, but I want to fold it up instead. I use my teeth a lot in this process. You guys are gonna think this is gross, but listen, I don't make wigs for nobody else but me, so I can do this. Besides, this mouth has been dirtier places. So this is what the hair looks like. So much for the hair. What else do you need? I have here my canvas wig block. I really recommend these, especially if you work with wigs pretty often. The measurement on this is 22.5, which is the average head size. To do the sewing, I have this jumbo curved needle. It looks like this. I recommend these over the straight needles. And then you also will want some weaving thread. I got this at the hair store, and it's just a huge roll. Before, I used to be into the dome wig cap, the spandex one. I've really outgrown that one because I couldn't pin into it with bobby pins because it was just solid. So I started using this. This is the Donna Deluxe multi-use weaving cap, and this one's made out of mesh, so I can pin bobby pins to it, is the great advantage. That's what that looks like. It has these adjustable straps, which I don't really use. If I want to make it tighter, I will sew an elastic band into the wig, but I'm gonna put this on my canvas head, and it's important that you put it on properly so I can see exactly where the front is, and I'm gonna line it up with the front of the head. And it's a little bit hard to see because I've covered this up with some plastic wrap to protect it, but your canvas head will have seams all along it, and the center front seam is where the center of your forehead is. So line that up with the center of the wig cap. I'm gonna take some sewing pins and pin the wig cap into the block with just a few pins, just so it doesn't slide around so much. So I'm gonna start off with a frontal that's gonna go in the front of the head. If I fold it in half, I can see exactly where the middle of the frontal is. And I'll put a pin in it right there so I can see. This is the middle of the frontal. Now I'm gonna line up the middle of the frontal with the middle seam in the canvas wig block. How far down do I take it? Do I stop here? Do I stop there? If this is where the hairline starts, I'm gonna take it just past where the cap ends because I got a big head. And I'm gonna put some pins in here just to lock that position in place. Now let's turn it around and flip the hair over. This is the back of the frontal, and I'm going to brush everything to the front because the back of the frontal is what we're actually sewing down. This is the angle at which I'm looking at it while I'm sewing. This whole U-shaped frontal needs to be flattened against the wig cap and sewn onto it. But this is pretty hard to get flat, and it's hard because you can easily go too much one way or too much the other. Let's try to start out by pinning down the middle with a little pin there. This side I'm gonna pull taut and lay flat against the wig cap. Now the frontal is laying flat against the wig cap, but we have to check if it's fully even. Before I sew it, I have to inspect if they're equal. Is there an equal amount of frontal on both sides? It looks like this side is about 1 inch short of this flap at the front, while this side is almost about 1/4 inch short of it. So this side is not pulled far back enough, and this side is pulled too far back. So let me undo those pins and just try to adjust it a little bit. The middle that I chose on top seems to be too biased to the right side, so I'm gonna pull it just ever so slightly in the opposite direction and try again. Does it look equal? You tell me. These are my 2 side flaps where it's gonna go on my ears. It's about 1/4 inch away from that front flap. About 1/4 inch away. I'd say that they're pretty much equal. Once the frontal is pinned completely flat on the cap and you've convinced yourself that it's not biased too much in favor of one side or the other, you can start sewing it. So I'm gonna thread my needle, and I double layer the thread, right? I'm gonna pull out about a single arm's length worth of thread. Then just tie off the end of the thread, cut off the excess after the knot, and it should look like that. So I'm gonna start in the middle and then go to the sides. I always pierce the needle through the net first, the net meaning the cap, and then I go through the frontal like that. Since this is my first stitch, remember how we tied a knot at the end of it? Let me get it right here. I'm gonna hook my needle into the loop of the thread. And then when I pull it out, that will tie it down for me. Now let's start our next stitch. I'm starting about 1 centimeter to the right of it. Notice how my other hand is holding the thread also to the right of the first stitch. So I'm gonna pierce my needle into the net and then up into the frontal like that. And then the needle is above my thread, so my thread is below it. And then all I do is just pull. And then notice where this hand is. It's still holding that thread. And then what that does is it secures the next stitch like that. And that's called a blanket stitch. So just to show you again, I'm holding the thread to the right of the last stitch, and I'm piercing the needle through, and then just pulling it up. And what that does is that each stitch reinforces the next one, reinforces the last one. I'm not digging my needle in through the canvas head. That's not what I'm doing, because you don't want to sew your wig to the block. You just want to ever so lightly go in through the holes of the mesh like that, but only pick up like 1 or 2 holes in the mesh, and then pierce through the frontal and pull the needle through. I'm only spacing these about 1 centimeter apart. I won't do any more than that, because if you space them too far apart, it's not very strong. See how there's this little loop in the thread even after I pulled it tight? Even when I pull this needle tight, that loop doesn't go away. If I was sloppy, I would just move on, but I don't want this loop here because that's just gonna be bumpy. So I dig my needle underneath those and then pull them up a little bit. Sometimes this just happens when the thread is too long, there's too many room for problems. So hold it up with your fingers like that, and then pull again. And now it's nice and flat. Those can also be a consequence of the thread getting too looped up. Do you see those subtle loops? See how I need to let my needle spin because the thread isn't straight. There we go. right? And once the needle is pierced through, I loop my thread around it. So see how my finger is always ahead of the needle? And now my finger is holding the thread taut so that it's nice and clean. Sometimes the ends where it meets the edge of the cap are the parts that tear the easiest. So I'm going to reinforce that with just an extra stitch. Then cut it off. Cut off the thread, giving yourself enough room to tie a nice knot, or 2, or 3. That's how much I like to do. Then cut off the rest. And that's the right half of the frontal sewed on. Now I'm just going to do the same to the left half. So to convince ourselves that we're on the right track, let's take our wig and take out all of the pins. Well, now you can understand what we've just done. We've just sewn the frontal to the wig cap by sewing it on that edge. And then once we take scissors to cut out all of this black stuff, this will sit nice and flat on our heads and we can glue it down. But now what's left is to sew all of the hair in the back here. There's this little adjustable strap for you to tighten it. I'm gonna cut this off because this little plastic thing is actually kind of bulky and I can't sew over it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna sew right along this line right here so I can sew that in place and actually keep that adjustable strap, but I'll cut off that little plastic holder, I guess. Because if we just cut this off without securely sewing into it, the elastic would just jump back that way, which I don't want. I want to keep that elastic stretch. Why not? So now we're ready to sew the bundles, and we're going to start in the back, going from this ear to this ear, and then working our way up. I don't like to sew onto this little tab. You can cut off this tab. I like to keep it on. Remember the bundles that we prepped in the beginning? Well, now I'm going to take them out. So unfold the entire thing, and then before we start sewing, we're gonna put pins down to see exactly what we're gonna do, right? And then this is how this bundle is gonna sit. Of course, the bundle is much longer than that. So after that one, we're gonna do another row on top, and then another one, and so on and so forth. For most of the wefts, I like to just work on my lap. So I've got the wig right here. So let's start here at the corner where this weft starts. If you can see, I'm actually piercing the needle through the fabric of the weft. With my first stitch, I loop the needle through the thread so that it just closes itself off like that. And then you continue with just the same process of sewing as the frontal. Once you get the hang of the technique of sewing and working with the curved needle and thread, you can really do this quite quickly. But I think getting used to working with a curved needle is half the battle. Then the other half of the battle is just figuring out how you're placing your wefts, how you are figuring out the geometry of where everything goes and piecing it together. Once you parse out the whole geometry of where all of the wefts go, then it's kind of just grunt work after that. So we have reached this corner. Now I'm gonna take the rest of the bundle that I've got beside me and I'm gonna fold it over itself. And I'm just going a little bit higher. So do you see that little distance there? That is how high I go from the previous weft, and this is where I'll sew my next one. If you're looking to save some money, you can buy 2 bundles of hair and a frontal instead of 3 bundles. And since you're working with less hair, you'll have to space them out more in order to cover the whole wig. If I really wanted my wig to be super laid and flat to my head, I might consider using 2 bundles of hair instead of 3, because 3 bundles will be lots of hair, it's going to be pretty thick. If you are doing even more bundles than that and using more hair, you're going to need to space them even closer together. This is all the thread that I have left, which tells me it's time to start a new thread. So I'm going to cut that off, tie it down. Cut off the excess, and then rethread your needle, or if you have multiple needles, you can jump right in with your next one. Starting your next thread with that loop through the hole to tie it down. So here we are at another corner. Again, we're meeting the frontal. So I'm gonna sew right up next to it. Let's pull the thread nice and taut so that that corner is down flat, and then just keep going. This process is gonna get really repetitive, so I'm gonna do the same exact process of zigzagging from corner to corner, from one end of the frontal to the other end. I'm gonna do that with the entire first bundle and most of the second bundle as well. It's only with the third and last bundle, once I get closer to the top, that I really switch things up. So I'll explain things further when I get up there, but for this part, I'm gonna time lapse lots of this. So I'm nearly at the end of my very first weft. See how if I fold over the next one, it only goes out to here. So I'm gonna sew all the way up to there, and then I'm gonna start working on my second weft and just continue on. Alright, so this is the end of my second bundle. All of the wefts that I've sewn on so far, I've just done zigzag from end to end to end to end to end. If I sewed my bundle like I've been sewing everything so far, I would be doing a U shape like this and this and this and this and this and this and this. It turns out, from experience, that creates lots of lines that are just going perpendicular to the frontal. And something that I've noticed is that when you look at the hair face on, if you just move a little bit, you will see all those lines. You'll see those. You'll see the black netting exposed. So what I want to do with my last bundle is I want to be sewing it parallel to the frontal. I'll mark it out with pencil just to give you an idea. So that's how I'm going to sew this last bundle. You'll also notice that I'm not going to do a zigzag pattern up here. I don't want too much lumpiness at the top. I'm gonna pin where I want this first one to go, and I'm gonna cut it off with scissors. Some wig makers really don't like cutting up your bundles. For one reason, it hurts the value of the bundles. If you need to take it apart, put it back together, it's better if the bundle is all in one piece as opposed to having been cut up into 100 different pieces. Another reason why people don't like cutting into their bundles is because it can cause some shedding when that raw edge starts to fray. So those are some considerations that you can take, but for me, I weigh the pros and the cons. So I've reached the end of one row, and I don't have anything to zigzag onto, but I'm not going to finish off my thread. I'm going to get the next row. Now I'm going to lay on top another row. Alright, our final row, I'm putting right up next to the frontal so you can't see any of this gap, right? So I measure it out, and this is probably a good length. Very small cut. Try not to cut any hairs when you're cutting the wefts. Okay, we're coming up on the end of this weft, which is good because we're also coming up on the end of this thread. So, let's see if I can get one more loop in this. There we go. Listen, you guys sitting at home have just seen all of this go on in a matter of minutes, but I've been working at this, sewing this for about 3 hours. I've been sitting in this chair, so it feels very satisfying to reach the end of it. There we go. Now what we want to do is cut off this whole part of the wig cap that we have not sewed on, which is the part that's underneath the lace frontal. So don't cut right up next to the lace. At least give yourself a little bit of room, because if you cut off the frontal, then you're kind of fucked up because you just ruined all that hard work. Right, so I'm leaving myself a little bit of wiggle room. This is what the inside of the wig looks like, so you guys get an idea of the construction. So there we have all the wefts that are just sewn side to side. Not the most precise science, but hey, it works. So this is what the wig finally looks like. Depending on the color you get and the style you get, maybe it's ready to wear. I'm not gonna wear it like this. I'm gonna add some funky colors to it. If you made it to the end of this video, thanks so much for sticking around. Be sure to stay tuned for my next video where I show you guys how to achieve this color. But even if you don't end up making a wig on your own, these same techniques also apply to sewing in wefts if you want to add hair to your wigs, whether it's synthetic or human. And it gives you a lot of insight into how wigs are made and everything that goes into them. I sort of believe in investing in some good hair because a lot of work really goes into them and you don't always see. Oh my god! Oh my god, it just called. Fuck, where is it? Oh, I don't like it. Ah! Okay. Oh my god, oh my god. Okay, I killed it. Oh my god. I really thought I had a piece of dirt on my viewfinder. Ugh. Anyway, as I was saying before, I was rudely interrupted. A lot of work goes into making these wigs, and I really find the more I've practiced, the more I've tried this out, the better I get. But I hope this gives you a little bit of insight if you've wanted to try this out on your own. Thanks again to Klaiyi Hair for sponsoring this video, but until my next one, I hope you guys are all doing well, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!